6:17 right now, and let's talk. We got something interesting to talk about this morning, especially on this Motivation Monday. We want to talk about forgiveness.
So last week, this stunning scene played out in a courtroom after the sentencing of Amber Geiger. She is the former Dallas police officer who was convicted in Botham Jean's murder. Now, this is Jean's brother, Brant Jean, saying that he loves her as a person, forgives her, and asked if he could hug her. The judge clearly allowed this, and this is the hug. His actions sparking polarizing reactions, though, on social media, like this tweet from Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, Bernice King, who called on people not to confuse forgiveness with absolving this nation for gross, bitter discrimination, and said racism can't be, quote, hugged out.
So this morning, motivational speaker, best-selling author, and life strategist Michael McGill Jr. joining us in the loft to talk about forgiveness.
Forgiveness, such a powerful thing, yet it's also a paradox, you know, the power and the paradox of forgiveness.
Right. So when you saw this scene play out, you heard his emotional plea before, and then he asked for the hug, and then that hug. When you saw it, did you have all good feels about it?
Yeah, it's a paradox for me because on one hand, I really do believe in the power of forgiveness. I know that psychology tells us, and when we think about the human body, forgiveness heals, forgiveness restores. And so I'm not one to really comment on his personal grieving process because that's the way that he chooses to grieve, if you will, and perhaps he's just wanting to be free from the emotional pain. But what gives me pause, what really is a juxtaposition for me, is the fact that people again assume that we can hug things out, but yet it won't really deal with the racism or the bigotry or the vitriol that really accosts people of color.
Do you think that it would have been different if she would have gotten a more severe sentence? Because it seems like that she got off easy. I mean, she got 10 years, she'll probably be out in 5, and there was a lot of, rightfully so, rage regarding that. And so maybe that played into a little bit of the backlash? Right.
Well, it goes into what we have with this criminal justice system, just from a sociological lens. When you really look at the data and the history, it's really not fair, it's not equitable. You know, people were really condemning the judge for the judge coming down and giving her a hug and giving her a Bible.
Hugged her too.
She hugged her too, right?
And
gave her a Bible. Then the officer was back there patting her head and getting her ready for the cameras. And hear me out. I'm all for compassionate judgeships. I believe in compassion. We need more compassion. In fact, we need compassion merged with the spirit of the law. However, even with that compassion, I really am begged to wonder the fact that if she had been, you know, think about the mother who put her daughter into the wrong school, the poor mother who put her daughter into the wrong school. She was given nearly just as much time. Think about the man, the black man who was arrested and who was sentenced to life in prison for stealing a $159 jacket. The other black man that was sentenced to life in prison for the intent to distribute $10 worth of weed that people are now profiting off of. So that is where it's juxtaposed for me. That's where some of the anger and the resentment comes from, because I just wonder, I don't know for certain, but I wonder, had it been a black man, a black officer who had walked into a white woman's home, hear me when I say this, and shot her accidentally while she was eating ice cream, when all the signs showed it was the wrong place, and it was revealed they had racist text messages as well as very militant in her social media profile, I can only wonder, would he have been given a hug? Would he have been given the grace and forgiveness speech? Would he have been given the compassion and the sympathy? And the research tells us from history, the answer is absolutely not.
So I think a lot of people too, I saw some memes where historically you see an enslaved woman who was a wet nurse. And then you see, and it goes through the ages, and you have
it's systemic.
And you see African Americans being very forgiving and being very compassionate and all of this. Does it play into some of those old stereotypes? And I know the answer, but I'm asking a professional.
Well, from a sociological lens, from a psychological lens, we call those patterns or pathologies. Pathology derives from the term pattern, to come from the root of something. And I do believe that is the case. I believe that's a part of it. I do believe, though, we confuse the term of forgiveness. We have been bamboozled and hoodwinked to believe that forgiveness means we absolve someone from their consequence.
And perhaps we don't face backlash.
Right, exactly.
If we show that we can forgive and we're compassionate. They're telling us to move on from this topic to a more general forgiveness for whatever reason. So let's talk about that as a whole. Let's talk about if, you know, if something lesser had happened and we see someone who was adversely impacted by someone else forgiving them. in general, that's a good thing.
Right. It's a great thing. It's a great thing
for the person.
It does.
But I mean, we have seen it like we saw in the mass shooting where many Jewish people were killed, the people from the synagogue coming forward and saying, we forgive the shooter. That was a horrific thing. But they had the ability to forgive. And for me, when I see that, I say I'm not there in my faith journey. I say I'm not there. But, so how do people go about taking the steps to do that?
And then the Charleston massacre as well. Same thing right afterwards.
And see, this is the other thing is when we think about the concept of forgiveness, I don't really know how they chose to forgive because so much, so much trauma happened. Like I said before, I do know that people, when you are in an emotional place of being wounded so much and when the trauma is so real, perhaps it's the only thing you know how to do to let yourself be cut from the emotional umbilical cord is to say, I forgive you. I release myself from the toxicity of this situation. Again, it does not absolve you from your issue, from the consequence.
It's just
exactly.
It's a personal choice you're making.
It's a conscious choice to help you heal, help you overcome, help you rise strong.
In all of these situations we're talking about, I think America needs a healing.
Right.
And so how do we get to that part? We got to figure that part out.
Listen, you just preached. Here's the thing about forgiveness, amen, is that in order to really have quality healing, you must also tell the truth in forgiveness. Forgiveness plus truth leads to transformation. And often we believe that I can quote unquote forgive you, but I don't tell the truth about the situation. That's called lying. We've kind of confused forgiveness with lying. No, lying says I don't talk about it. Lying says I don't tell the truth about how I feel. Forgiveness says here's my experience, here's how I feel, but I'm choosing to move forward and relieve you of the emotional debt, maybe not the societal debt, maybe not the debt in the criminal justice system, but the emotional weight so that I can move forward and rise strong.
Because I got to live.
Because I got to
We have to live.
And forgiveness is free and it liberates the soul.
Michael McGill, Jr., you are always such a breath of fresh air. This is where you find him if you need some motivation, not just on Monday, but every doggone day of the week. He's a life strategist and an author. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Friend of the show.